Hello, everybody. Today is Monday, October 23rd in the United Corporations of America. My name is Lewis. I am here today. We're going to have a big show covering all sorts of topics, starting off initially with an update from the Israel Palestine conflict going on, the war going on, the fallout that's happening in Gaza, what Israel's next plans are, and all the like there. We're also going to be looking at the implications of where is this going? What is the potential end game? What are people thinking? Where is this going? And could this potentially spread into other conflicts? There's a lot going on in the world right now. So we're just going to take a little bit of a look at all of that. And then we haven't really covered this too extensively, but it has been going on for so long now that and I don't see an end to this either. Talk about a conflict that's not going to end. Obviously what's going on in Israel and Gaza, but on a much lighter note that does still have serious implications. The GOP is just all over the place right now as far as the speaker race. We're 3 weeks in on no Speaker of the House, and we are nowhere close to seeing one elected, in my opinion, at this point. So we're going to break down all of that after we cover Israel and Palestine. But first, for those of you just joining right now, please smash the like button to help get this video out to more folks. It helps a lot in the algorithm. Again, I'm Lewis. I'm here today filling in. Normally you'd see Jordan here, but Jordan is in the late stages, hopefully, for his sake, of wrapping up his book on the Flint water crisis. So hopefully after the month of October is done, you'll be seeing him a lot more on here. This week, though, you're going to see me. You're going to see Ron Falcone again. You'll see Tina Desiree Berg, as well as others as we continue to update on what is going on across the country. But first, like I said, we're going to get started with Israel and Gaza. Before we jump right into this, though, I'm speculating that it's probably related. Just about an hour and a half ago, President Biden was actually giving an update on Bidenomics, if you will, and actually wrapped up his speech by saying that he needed to leave and was headed to the Situation Room. Colin, we can go ahead and just play that clip here for folks.
See. I apologize. I have to go to the Situation Room with another issue that I have to deal with. But thank you.
So very little information on what is going on with that. We will keep an eye on it throughout the show. Colin will bump in and give us an update if something does break on that news. But again, that was just about an hour or so ago. President Biden kind of ended his speech on Bidenomics, saying he's sorry he's got to go because he is headed to the Situation Room. Some of the speculation was that it is in regards to some hostages that had just been released from Gaza at this point, but we really don't necessarily know thus far. But with all of that out of the way, let's jump right in. Maybe some good news, although there's a lot of caveats involved with all of this. Aid is finally making its way into Gaza at this point in time. We can go ahead and pull up the article from CNN. And I think I have the right one here. Aid getting into Gaza. So the headline is updated. Hamas releases 2 more hostages as Israel ramps up Gaza strikes. And this article has literally been updated in the last couple of minutes here, so I want to make sure it is all good here. Hamas released 2 Israeli citizens on Monday, according to multiple sources, amid growing pressure to secure the release of hundreds of hostages taken by Gaza militant group during its brutal October 7th terrorist attack on Israel. I can confirm that my mother, Yochi Lifshitz, was one of the hostages released to the Red Cross this evening. While I cannot put into words the relief she is now safe, daughter Sharon Lifshitz said in a statement, she said she remained focused on securing the release of her father, still believed to be in captivity. Multiple sources say Nurit Cooper as the second hostage freed on Monday. The group's fighters killed more than 1,400 people that day, according to the Israel Defense Forces, in what was the most deadly attack by militants in Israel's 75-year history, and revealed a staggering intelligence failure by the country's security forces. In response, Israel has bombarded Gaza, which Hamas controls, killing more than 5,000 people and injuring more than 15,000 in Gaza in just over 2 weeks, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. The blasts have leveled entire neighborhoods, including schools and mosques, and devastated the already insufficient healthcare system. The International Committee of Red Cross confirmed on Monday that it had facilitated the 2 hostages' release, transporting them out of Gaza. Our role as neutral intermediary makes this work possible, and we are ready to facilitate any future release. We hope they will be back soon with their loved ones, ICRC posted to their official X account. I am going to scroll down a little bit here as Colin, you can go down to aid trickles into the enclave. Again, this article has been updated with those 2 hostages being released earlier this afternoon. But as I kind of prefaced here, aid has now been trickling into Palestine, into the Gaza Strip. A total of 34 trucks filled with desperately needed aid traveled into Gaza from Egypt over the weekend, but none carried fuel supplies, which is vital for running hospitals and treating water in the isolated territory. Israel has said fuel would be purloined by Hamas. A further 20 trucks crossed Rafah into Gaza on Monday, but according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UN spokesman Stefan Durek warned that the current aid provisions reaching Gaza were, quote, a drop in the bucket. No fuel means no functioning water desalination. No fuel also means that humanitarian partners will have to focus almost their entire aid delivery operation on transporting water. It also means no bakeries and no hospitals, the OCHA statement declared. Aid workers and international leaders warned that the supplies were insufficient to combat the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, while the Palestine Red Crescent Society said it's a drop in the ocean of what is needed. The territory normally receives 455 aid trucks per day, according to the United Nations. That means with the weekend deliveries, Gaza is more than 7,200 truckloads of aid short of what it normally would have received between October 7th and October 22nd. CNN calculations suggest that's half of 1% or 1/200th of the amount of aid it normally gets. The article does continue on here, but again, the major headline out of this shouldn't necessarily be that aid is getting there. I'm glad aid is getting there, of course. We've been, saying aid needs to get to the innocent civilians that are stuck in this territory still. Again, I want to be very clear on all of this because this is such a heated topic. We're going to discuss a little bit of this later just because folks are so entrenched in their views on this. We're 100% here condemning Hamas. Hamas, terrorist organization, killed a bunch of innocent Israelis. However, that does not make it open season, essentially, on Palestinian civilians who, by no fault of their own, are wrapped up in this situation. So when we see these civilians being targeted by having their water supplies shut off, by having power shut off, personally, I'm going to call it out. Last week on the show, I highlighted the fact that the United States very much condemned Russia for shutting off power and targeting infrastructure that would affect civilians in Ukraine when Russia was doing it. The word that was used to describe it was, I believe it was brutal, and was I'm blanking on the other word here, but the Secretary of State used very strong language against Russia for doing this to Ukraine, as he should have, but we're not following that same standard here when it comes to Israel. So again, 34 trucks over the weekend came in via the Rafah crossing versus what used to be during ordinary times in quotes here, 455 trucks per day. Now, when you shut off the only clean water available to Palestinians, which was little to begin with, arguably that 455 trucks a day, that number is only going to need to go up if you're going to make sure that the civilians within the Gaza Strip are going to be okay. It's increased more bottled water needing to come in. The article mentions fuel. If you don't have fuel, you can't have generators running the hospitals that are already overwhelmed in Gaza. That the CNN article cites there were, I believe it was 15,000 injured in Gaza at this point. So definitely not an ideal situation as far as aid is going. The fact that, anyone is kind of celebrating this as a win is just, I guess if you're searching for a win in this conflict, that's a small one. There really aren't many others, but still, obviously, a lot of work to be done on that regard. For those of you just joining us right now, please smash the like button to help get this more out to more folks. We would greatly appreciate it, and it helps with the algorithm quite a bit. But with that being said, sure, aid is coming in, but a whole lot more aid may need to be coming in based on the language coming out of the Israelis, who are currently seeming to prepare to invade into Gaza for an actual ground invasion. We talked a little bit about this last week. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the article on a ground invasion, potentially moving in Israeli forces into Gaza. As a ground incursion looms, the big question remains, what is Israel's plan for Gaza? Israel's border with Gaza. Tal and Zach have no idea how long they'll be deployed in what the Israelis call, quote, the Gaza envelope, the area in southern Israel that was attacked by Hamas terrorists 2 weeks ago. It could be weeks, it could be months, they said. It's the same for everybody. Nobody knows, Zach told CNN at a military camp not far from the Gaza border. The two young soldiers, whose surnames CNN is not revealing for security reasons, serve in an artillery unit of the IDF that was moved into the area after Hamas militants killed 1,400 people and kidnapped about 200 on October 7th. Their unit is part of a massive buildup of Israeli troops and military materials on the Gaza border. On top of its regular force, the IDF has also called up 300,000 reservists who reported to their bases within hours. Across Israel, highways in the vicinity of the major bases are lined with thousands and thousands of cars abandoned by reservists rushing to take up arms. A ground incursion by Israel into Gaza now seems inevitable. On Thursday, the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told troops gathered near the border that they would, quote, soon see the enclave from the inside, and said Gaza will, quote, never be the same. He later pledged that the expected incursion will be the, quote, last maneuvering inside of Gaza due to the simple reason that Hamas will cease to exist. It might take a month, 2, but eventually there will be no Hamas. But what that operation might look like remains unknown. The IDF could launch a full-scale invasion or conduct more precise incursions aimed at recovering the hostages and targeting Hamas operatives. The hostage situation could complicate any potential incursions into Gaza. According to two sources briefed on the discussions, the United States has pressed Israel to delay its invasion to allow for the release of more hostages. The release on Friday of 2 Americans by Hamas signaled the possibility of freeing more hostages, but Israel has not indicated it is considering a ceasefire. What will happen after that is an even bigger question. While the Israeli leadership speaks of the need to get rid of Hamas, the plan of the future of Gaza and its more than 2 million people remains unknown. And we're going to get into what the future of Gaza could be in a little bit. But at that point, again, they're saying, the actual ground invasion of Gaza could happen at any point at this point in time. And actually, since that article was written just this afternoon, 2 more hostages actually were released. These were not American hostages. These were Israeli hostages due to some negotiations with I believe it was the Egyptians and the Qataris negotiating for the release of these 2 Israeli hostages that were being held by Hamas. Again, that was kind of just broken this afternoon. With all of this being said, obviously, we saw last week just the horrific images, videos of, regardless of who did this, again, it's still kind of up in the air, the bombing at the hospital. We've seen just rockets going in both directions here. Most of the deaths on the Israeli side have been less at this point. The initial rockets from Hamas and the incursion of Hamas moving into Israel took a lot more lives. Right now, the Palestinians are seeing massive numbers at this point. Again, the numbers are not all confirmed, so I do want to be careful with this. I had this caveat a couple times in the last couple shows. We've talked about this. Getting accurate information out of all of this is difficult, so take the numbers with a grain of salt. But at this point, it seems like inside of Palestine, the tragedies of loss of civilian lives are only going up. This is before a ground invasion. A ground invasion will make this even more difficult. just to relate the point back to the United States here. We actually had former Congressman Justin Amash had several relatives who actually live in Gaza. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the tweet here. And again, former Congressman Amash, he put out this message. I was really worried about this. With great sadness, I have now confirmed that several of my relatives, including Viola and Yara, pictured here, were killed at St. Porphyus Orthodox Church in Gaza, where they had been sheltering when the complex was destroyed as a result of an Israeli airstrike. Give rest, O Lord, to their souls, and may their memories be eternal. The Palestinian Christian community has endured so much. Our family is hurting badly. May God watch over all Christians in Gaza and all Israelis and Palestinians who are suffering, whatever their religion or creed. Again, that's a former Congressman, Justin Amash. Many members of Congress reaching out to him after that to share their grievances with that. That's just another reminder, again, of the literal thousands, unfortunately, at this point, who have died in this incursion into Gaza, and also, I believe it was 1,400 Israelis have also been killed as a result of this. Just terrible. My take on this is like, we don't, especially civilian lives lost in any end of this is horrible. I pulled a tweet of this a couple weeks ago from Status Coup friend Zaina. Zaina said, people are not their governments. And I believe that wholeheartedly. These people who are tied up in all of this are not the people calling these decisions, making these decisions. We should have empathy for folks who are being dragged into the situation. To me, that is what's most important. It's terrible what is probably going to happen because if a ground invasion does occur, the Israelis are going to lose a whole lot of soldiers. A lot of Palestinian civilians will die. It's going to be an ugly situation, to say the least. But that's right now we're on the track that is going to be happening. Let's continue on here. So the ground invasion has been kind of the big topic this weekend. There was some speculation that the United States was actually asking Israel to delay this invasion. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was asked about this on Face the Nation this weekend. Colin, let's go ahead and play that clip.
Have you asked the Israeli government to delay in order to give you more time to broker the release of these hostages?
First, step back for a second, because it's important to remember what happened. It's incredible how quickly that gets lost, because it was only a couple of weeks ago that Hamas invaded Israel with its terrorist fighters and slaughtered, and I use that word very deliberately, slaughtered so many people. Again, right. Men, women, young children, babies, old people, you name it. And they continue to rain rockets down on Israel. When I was there a few days ago, we had to take shelter a couple of times because of incoming rockets from Hamas. So my point is this: no country can be expected to tolerate this, to live with this. And as we said from the start, Israel has both the right and even the obligation not only to defend itself, but to try to make sure that, to the best of its ability, this can't happen again. So we talk to the Israelis about what they're planning. We give them our best advice. It's important, as we've said, not only what they do, but how they do it, particularly when it comes to making sure that civilians are as protected as they possibly can be in this crossfire of Hamas is making. But in terms of what we're talking to Israel about with regard to their military operations, it really is focused on both how they do it and how best to achieve the results that they seek.
So you could look at that a couple different ways. Number one, either the U.S. did ask for them to delay this and Israel is weighing it or considering ignoring it. Again, they have not technically invaded on the ground into Gaza yet at this point. Or maybe the United States isn't asking. We don't actually care about preventing this ground invasion in the first place. Maybe thinking like that this is inevitable. I don't necessarily, at this point, maybe it is inevitable. I would hope not. But, looking at the posturing of so many of our leaders, at least. Again, you know, you got Secretary Blinken there kind of starting that off by saying, you know, remember the slaughtering that took place, which again, I mean, the word is correct, slaughter. I mean, it was, especially we showed footage last week at some point of the Israeli music festival that was targeted at one point. Those are very innocent civilians who were just out living their normal lives. So slaughter is the right word to use, but essentially using it as a justification of, yeah, so that we can continue to support Israel to make their own decisions and do what they're going to do, but also making sure they're following like the rules of the game, the rules of war. Again, still not necessarily calling out Israel on some of the rules that they've already broken here, just saying that, you know, similar to what President Biden echoed last week, saying, I'm confident that, you know, the Israelis are going to play by the rules. Again, not necessarily saying that they've already broken some of those rules. One example being shutting off power and water to not just, you know, Hamas, but the 2 to 2.5 million totally innocent civilians who are caught up in the crossfire of all of this, stuck in Gaza at this point in time. And you know what? The president himself continuing to make this case as well. He is really trying at this point to frankly sell war to Americans who, in my opinion, a lot of them probably don't want war. And we're going to get into the specifics of that in a second. But he's really pitching the United States to get on board and continue to support not only this ongoing, you know, war that's getting started in Israel, but to keep the funding flowing to Ukraine as well. Let's take a listen directly to the president. This was posted on his Twitter account over the weekend.
You know, history has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to America and the world keep rising. So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine.
So, you know, first talking about terror and you know, preventing terror where it is, and also, you know, if you don't stop Putin, he's not going to stop at Ukraine. So first on just like the terror end of this, how many times have we, you know, I mean, it's been at least a couple, you know, gone on a crusade on a war against terror to have it just all it ends up doing is making a whole nother generation of people who've now been invaded by the United States get mad at the United States for invading their territory, accidentally taking a bunch of civilian casualties, taking over their way of life, inserting your democracy here, even though it's not their democracy. It's some puppet from the United States, not from the United States, but someone who's going to listen to what the United States says. That government collapses. And then you've got a whole new generation of people who grow up in a terrible situation. And then you wonder later why they don't like the United States, and some of these, you know, groups that are terrorist groups start to grow in numbers. You wonder why people start to hate us in that way. And I'm not saying that that's okay, but we can't act surprised when that is the situation that continues to unfold time and time again. That's the logic President Biden is using, is saying, like, we're going to go to them and take out those organizations where they're from before they come to us. And again, I think obviously you do need to be trying to stop terrorism from happening, no doubt. But going and starting a foreign war in another country that's going to lead to another response like we saw after 9/11 is just not going to go well. You're going to lead to 10 to 20 years of war that's going to cost trillions of dollars. And what are you going to have to show for it? What are you going to have to show for it? I don't know. The answer is there's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot. And especially when you look at these two wars that we're talking about right now. I mean, again, primary focus right now is on what's going on in Gaza, but look at the war between Ukraine and Russia. We've spent over $100 billion there. Now, I think there are instances where the United States can help with humanitarian aid in these certain instances and whatnot. But like, what do we stand to gain from this? Like, what does the United States stand to gain from continuing to back Ukraine? What does the United States continue to gain from, again, spending billions now in in Israel, or worse, like sending actual troops in. It's the answers are not immediately clear. We'll put it that way. The answers are not immediately clear. Please, though, folks who are joining us right now, smash the like button to help get this out to more folks. I'll also say, too, if you've got thoughts on this and you want to leave a super chat, I will read all of the super chats at the end of the show. I try to keep an eye on some of the comments as they're coming in, but the super chats I will definitely see because they get set aside, and I will make sure to read all of those. But keep chatting amongst yourselves in the chat as well. Love to see the discussions going on. But more importantly right now, where do Americans stand on this ongoing crisis between Israel and Palestine? They don't stand in the same place that the Biden administration is standing at the moment. I'll break it to you right now. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the poll, actually. This came out at the end of last week, and it shows that 66% of likely voters agree that the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza to prevent civilian deaths. Colin, you can kind of like just zoom in on the image there. This has actually got major bipartisan support across the board here. So again, all likely voters, 66% agree that the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. You've got 80% of Democrats, and wait until you hear what the Biden administration said about this last week also. 80% of Democrats are calling for a ceasefire and de-escalation. You've got 57% of folks who identify as independents, and you even have 56% of Republicans who agree that the United States should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. I don't remember, there's not many issues in the US that have 66% of the country all on board, let alone a majority of both Democrats, Republicans, and independents. There are not many issues that happens with, but clearly this is one of them. However, again, if you're listening to the messaging coming out of the White House, the words coming out of the mouth of Secretary Anthony Blinken, of Joe Biden in that last video we just played, it wouldn't seem like they're seeing the same thing, or they have other incentives to push for this war, I guess. Not great. I want to pull up a clip that came out from, it was a little over a week ago at this point. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was actually asked directly about members of Congress who'd been asking for a ceasefire. We covered this last week a little bit. And this is what White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had to say about those congressmen and women. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
What is the president's message to members of Congress who seem to be equating the Hamas terror attack with actions that were previously taken by Israel?
Look, here's the thing, and which congressional members?
Well, there have been some members of Congress who have called for a ceasefire, and they have not gone as far as backing the administration's call for support for Israel.
So look, I've seen some of those statements this weekend, and we're going to continue to be very clear. We believe they're wrong. We believe they're repugnant, and we believe they're disgraceful. Our condemnation belongs squarely with terrorists who have brutally murdered, raped, kidnapped hundreds of Israelis. There can be no equivocation about that. There are not two sides here. There are not two sides. President Biden has been clear on where he has stood. You heard from him directly today. You heard from him also on Saturday on this. There's been multiple statements from this president, and he's taking action to provide additional support to ensure that Israel has what they need to defend themselves.
So calling for a ceasefire is repugnant and disgraceful. I'll say that again. The official stance of the White House, at least last week, was that members of Congress calling for a ceasefire, particularly to prevent civilians from dying, is not only repugnant, but it is also disgraceful. So I think that tells you where the White House is on this at the moment. I saw a comment in here from Chris Garrett that says 66%. I thought this was a democracy. You would think that 66% of our elected representatives probably would end up in the same boat here, but it really doesn't seem so. Instead, we're seeing just major bipartisanship for the war machine is what it really seems like. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the next tweet here. We had 10% of the United States Senate in Tel Aviv just, what was this, yesterday? Just yesterday, you have 10% of the entire U.S. Senate in Tel Aviv to go see how things are going. I'm going to read the thread here. Senator Lindsey Graham, speaking in Tel Aviv, says 10% of the U.S. Senate is in Israel right now. Quote, I saw things today I never thought possible and warns Iran, we are watching you. Quote, destroying Hamas is non-negotiable. Senator Reid says Hamas hates the Jewish people and does not care about the Palestinian people. I tend to agree with that statement. Senator Collins holds up a photo of a 3-year-old girl named Abigail who was kidnapped by Hamas and is now being held hostage in Gaza, she says. Senator Coons, we cannot let Iran and its proxies win. Again, that's a direct call out of Iran from 2 U.S. senators at this point. Senator Blumenthal says Iran gave Hamas the green light to launch its massacre on Israel. That's 3 of these people calling out Iran directly. I mean, maybe more of them do too. Senator Britt, I do not believe good can exist with evil, says Hamas must be destroyed, and warns Iran, there's 4, and its proxies, we will take you down. What? Just, I guess we're just, looking to get into a war with Iran directly now, as if we don't have enough going on around the world and on our plate. And again, what good is that going to do you and me and everybody else sitting in the United States right now? What do we stand to gain from escalating this conflict to what sounds like a call for a direct war with Iran? What are these people thinking? They're certainly not thinking about what is best for you and I. It sure looks like they're thinking about what is best for maybe all of the, piles of military industrial complex dollars that flow into all of their campaigns, thinking about the board seats that they're going to have when they eventually either lose their election or maybe they'll die in office. Unfortunately, like we're starting to see the trend of happening. Not that I'm advocating for that to happen, but again, these people are staying in these positions for way too long. That kind of talk is not good for the average American, is not going to help our country as a whole. And if anything, could lead to, not even could, it would make things worse. We would be funding billions you think we're spending a lot of money in Ukraine? Whew. I can tell you what, we'll be spending easily 10 times that. And it would drag on forever, some sort of conflict or war with Iran. That would be a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Terrible. I'll say it again. What? Frustrating. Bipartisan support right there for that. So I don't know. Rightfully, based on what we're reading, the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the CNN article, is concerned about this escalating. Based on some of those statements, I share his concerns. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said Sunday the U.S. is, quote, concerned about potential escalation in the Middle East after a day of announcing the deployment of additional military assets in the region. I wonder if we've looked in the mirror to see if we have anything to do with that escalation. We're concerned about potential escalation. In fact, what we're seeing is a prospect of significant escalation of attacks on our troops and our people throughout the region. And because of that, we're going to do what's necessary to make sure that our troops are in a good position and they're protected and that they have the ability to respond, he said on ABC's This Week. On Saturday night, Austin announced the deployment of additional missile defense systems in the Middle East and additional U.S. troops on prepare to deploy orders. Those deployments add to a series of other U.S. military movements since Hamas attacked Israel 2 weeks ago, including a U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force consisting of 2,000 Marines and sailors and 2 carrier groups ordered to the Eastern Mediterranean to deter Iran, and its allies, Syria and Hezbollah, from opening new fronts against Israel. U.S. officials have previously stressed that there are not plans to put American boots on the ground to fight in the war between Israel and Hamas, which Israeli officials have warned could be prolonged and difficult. Austin said the deployment of a terminal high-altitude defense battery, as well as additional Patriot battalions to locate throughout the region, was to protect U.S. troops in the area. Both the THAAD and Patriot systems are air defense systems designed to shoot down short, medium, and intermediate ballistic missiles. It's good with that article, Colin, but I mean, if we're talking about shooting ballistic missiles down, that's not concerns over Hamas. Hamas doesn't have ballistic missiles. They're shooting essentially like, much smaller homemade. I mean, their missiles can still do damage, but we're not talking like long-range ballistic missiles. That is some concerns of direct conflict with some of the countries mentioned here. What all the senators are mentioning, Iran, not great. I do want to add a little bit more context from Secretary Austin here. Colin, I believe we have, yes, Colin, can we go ahead and play the clip with Secretary Austin as well?
And they're about to launch this ground offensive in Gaza. You were at CENTCOM. You were the CENTCOM commander when ISIS had control of Mosul, and it took 9 months, but you cleared ISIS out of Mosul with our Iraqi and Kurdish partners. What is that? What were the lessons you learned there that apply here?
Well, the first thing that everyone should know, and I think everybody does know, that urban combat is extremely difficult. It goes at a slow pace.
That was 9 months. Nine months of intense combat.
Yes. This may be a bit more difficult because of the underground network of tunnels that that Hamas has constructed over time, and the fact that they've had a long time to prepare for a fight. So I think you'll see a fight that's characterized by a lot of IEDs, a lot of booby traps, and just really grinding activity going forward.
So again, comparing this to what happened in Mosul, that was a couple of years back at this point. That took 9 months. Lloyd Austin there describing this as being more difficult. Jordan flagged this for me earlier today. Breaking Points did a good job of breaking this down on their show, and there was some interesting context that I wanted to add. So ISIS had about 8,000 fighters in Mosul, folks who were actually, actively fighting in that. In Gaza at the moment, the estimate is roughly 50,000 members of Hamas. So you can do the math there. 8,000 fighters in Mosul took about 9 months, 50,000 fighters in Gaza. I mean, we're talking a much more difficult scheme here, very densely populated, urban warfare. Secretary Austin mentioned tunnels and all sorts of stuff going on to make this even more difficult. This is not going to be just like, ground invasion, we're done next week, we can all move on. This is way, 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 way more complicated than what we're used to dealing with. I'm going to keep moving here. We got one more clip from just another ghoul looking to turn this into a bigger issue. The one and only Senator Mitch McConnell, in an interview that he, at one point he was asked about his health in this, and he said he's fine. We'll see. But let's go ahead and listen to what Mitch McConnell is saying about all of this. Again, he's still the leader of the Republican caucus in the Senate, has a lot of sway on these sorts of things. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
President Biden said he's going to hold Iran accountable. What do you think that means?
I think the proof will be, what are we going to do to hold them accountable? And it's got to be credible. You can't, on the one hand, be negotiating with Iran on some kind of nuclear deal that they won't keep, and then turn around and declare that you're going to get tougher with Iran. I think, number one, quit talking to the Iranians about any kind of nuclear deal. Number two, don't give them the $6 billion. And number three, back up the Israelis in every conceivable way after this attack by Iran-sponsored Hamas.
You oppose all diplomacy with Iran.
It's not a question of whether you ever talk to them or not, but it's a question, what do you do? What do you do? And clearly, the nuclear deal that the Obama administration agreed to and that the Biden administration tried to connect is not the way to go. There's an axis of evil in the world: China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And we need to stand up to the axis of evil, not try to do business with them.
We need to stand up to the axis of evil, not do business with them. Sound warmongery much? I don't know. You ask if I don't need to tell you that it is. It is. And it's scary to be seeing folks talking like this. Kind of one last serious article on this section, and then we're going to get a little bit of interesting reaction, if you will. This has the potential implications to boil into a whole lot. And what Mitch McConnell just said at the end there ties into it. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the piece from Axios. Behind the curtain, rattled U.S. government fears war could spread. Never before have we talked to so many top government officials who in private are so worried about so many overseas conflicts at once. Why it matters, we don't like to sound dire, but to sound a siren of clinical, clear-eyed realism, U.S. officials say that this confluence of crises poses epic concern and historic danger. Behind the scenes, officials tell us that inside the White House, this was the heaviest, most chilling week since President Biden took office just over 1,000 days ago. Former Defense Secretary Bob Gates, who ran the Pentagon under both President George W. Bush and Barack Obama, tells us that America is facing the most crises since World War II ended 78 years ago. He explains that the White House's system overload like this, there is this gigantic funnel that sits over the table in the Situation Room, and all of the problems in the world end up coming through that funnel to the same 8 or 10 people. There's a limit to the bandwidth that those 8 or 10 people can have. Not one of these crises can be solved and checked off, and all 5 could spiral into something much bigger. They get into the 5 issues here, and I'm going to go through them. Number 1, Israel's response to Hamas terrorist attack and growing fear of a spreading war that reaches to Iran and beyond. Officials point to the protests, threats, and deadly anti-American warnings of Arab nations after they thought incorrectly that Israel struck a hospital in Gaza, killing hundreds. This is a preview of what they fully expect and would be a worldwide response to expected Israeli invasion of Gaza. The U.S. is deploying 2 aircraft carriers to the region. A Navy U.S. destroyer Thursday shot down missiles from Yemen that appeared to be headed toward Israel. U.S. troops were fired on this week as well by drones in Iraq and Syria. The number 2 threat here, Vladimir Putin meeting in China this week with Xi Jinping to further strengthen their anti-America alliance. In a new foreign affairs article that top officials are sharing, Gates argued that both leaders believe in America and other big democracies are, quote, past their prime and have entered an irreversible decline. Putin and Xi sniff weakness and are activating on many fronts, top administration officials tell us. We'll skip down to a malicious Iran. It is unclear how involved Iran was in orchestrating or assisting with the Hamas terrorist attack, but officials seem certain that there are ties. More worrisome, U.S. officials fear Hezbollah, a much bigger terrorist group than Hamas, funded by Iran, will strike the moment Israel gets stuck in Gaza. Number 4, then there's the unhinged leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and his frequent testing of long-range nuclear-capable missiles. As Gates points out, the combined nuclear arsenal of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea could, within a few years, be nearly double the size of America's. That's frightening to read because we probably have way too many as well. And then number 5, a new weapon is being deployed in all of these conflicts. A massive spread of doctored or wholly fake videos to manipulate what people see and think in real time. The architects of these new technologies in background conversations with us after demonstrating new capabilities soon to be released say even the sharpest eyes looking for fake videos will have an impossible time detecting what is real. This article goes on, but I mean, that's a scary that's a scary thing to think about. It's not, I'm not saying all of this is in line here and is going to fall into place. However, there is a lot going on all at once here as far as the United States being involved in the world stage. Personally, and I've been pretty clear about this, I just really don't think that we should be getting militarily involved anywhere unless it directly affects us here at home. But again, we just, saw 10% of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, Joe Biden, the White House press secretary. You've seen a whole bunch of other folks all really lining up in support to just continue to pile on here, despite the fact that, again, what was it? 66% of Americans support a ceasefire. That things are not adding up here in the way that they should. And Colin, I'm actually going to skip over the reactions here just to keep you up to speed. I mean, I'll talk briefly about it. I mean, folks are just so tied in on their takes here and really doubling down on everything. It makes it into a way that you can't have discussions about this topic with different folks. I know some family members who, have just atrocious takes on this that don't consider human life the same across the board, and that folks should be, because they live in one place or another. It's just like, well, that's war. They're tied up in this. And that's just terrible to really think about. But with that, we are going to switch gears here. I want to talk about what's going on with the Speaker of the House, or the lack thereof of a Speaker of the House. Before we get into that, though, please smash the like button to those of you who are just joining us right now to help get this out to more folks. And I do want to remind folks, too, this show is pretty focused on things that we have not done some of our on-the-ground reporting on, but Status Coup is really known for our amazing on-the-ground reporting, covering so many of the issues in the United States that are mostly ignored. Jordan put out a video earlier today on the expanded UAW strike. We spent the first 25 days of the UAW strike on the ground actually talking to workers. We'd love to get back and cover that story. I personally spent about a month on the ground, over 4 trips in East Palestine, Ohio, covering the just terrible situation that the folks are still going on there in regards to the Norfolk Southern train derailment and explosion of, toxic chemicals in their backyard. That should still be major news because those folks have still not been made whole. If you want to support Status Coup to make sure that we can continue to tell stories like that, statuscoup.com/join is the way to do so for literally as low as $5 to $10 a month. It actually makes a huge difference to get a couple people together for $5 a month to be able to make that happen, to make those trips happen, to make sure that the lived experience of real Americans in this country who are just being wholly ignored, we can make sure to lift their stories up so that you can actually hear directly from them and not from some media figures who never leave their studio ever to go see what the lived experience is like in our country. Because I'll tell you what, in a lot of cases, it is pretty damn grim. So if you're able to help us out, I would super appreciate it. And I will shout you out in the show if you do it in the next couple minutes here. Again, super chats also very, very much welcome. We will read them all at the end of the show. All right, moving on to the speaker's race, though. Let's get everybody up to speed on this because it's been a bit of a whirlwind. This has gone on a lot longer than I initially thought. So let's go even back to January for a second. The only way that Kevin McCarthy was brought into his role as speaker to begin with was because the Freedom Caucus members, kind of led by Matt Gaetz, forced a one vote motion to vacate option, essentially saying, we'll vote for you, but if you are doing things we don't like, we want to be able to have any member of Congress essentially remove you. Matt Gaetz, a couple weeks back, took that motion seriously, and on October 3rd, Kevin McCarthy was actually removed as the Speaker of the House. Fast forward, October 11th, that was they basically waited a week to try to get their ducks in a row to pick who was going to be the next Speaker of the House. They had an internal vote. So this was behind closed doors. And kind of an interesting thing about these internal votes, there was so much leaking going on in kind of private internal GOP meetings that I actually don't have a video. I wish I had it for you. You'll have to take my word for it. But House staffers were actually collecting members' cell phones before they were going into these rooms to have the meetings, and had a little cubby system. They don't trust their members to not leak it or to just talk about it. So they took their cell phones before going into the room so that people could speak under anonymity, because God forbid we find out what our elected reps actually think behind closed doors. That sounds so terrible, right? Ugh. So they take their cell phones, they go in for their first, internal vote. And that one led to current House Majority Whip Steve Scalise winning an internal vote of just Republicans, 113-99 over Jim Jordan. Within hours of that happening, right now, who Kevin McCarthy is calling the Crazy Eight members of the House, they're kind of the Freedom Caucus-y type folks. They're kind of currently being led by Matt Gaetz. Basically said within hours that no way in hell they're voting for Steve Scalise. Sorry. So to let you know why just those 8 members have that kind of control is the Republicans with no Democrat votes can only lose 5 Republican votes for the next Speaker of the House. So, if 5 Republicans essentially go against whoever the main nominee is, that person is not going to be elected Speaker of the House. So Scalise was done even before they had a real vote on the House floor. October 13th, there was a second internal vote. Again, behind closed doors, members' cell phones taken away because, again, God forbid we find out what's actually happening behind closed doors, and Republicans apparently love to leak on each other and spill the guts here. But second internal vote led to a Jim Jordan victory, 124-81 over Austin Scott. Obviously, he wins, but it's not a landslide, 124-81. Again, when you can only have 8 votes against you in the actual House floor vote. Then during the period between October 17th and October 20th, there were 3 Speaker votes on the floor. We have the results here, Colin. If you can pull up the CNN article here, and I think if you scroll down to the bottom, it's the first one first, and then the ones after that. If you scroll down a bit, I think not that one. Do we have the? There should be one just before that. It's not that article. Did I just give you the wrong one? Yes, that one. There you go. Scroll down and go to the first round vote first, actually. So the first round, you had Hakeem Jeffries, who was going to consistently get 212 here. The Democrats basically lock and step have just said, yep, we're going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries every single time. Republicans haven't really tried to win their votes over at all. We're going to talk about that in a second. But so round 1, Jim Jordan gets 220 Republicans defect. Round 2, Jim Jordan actually gets 1 less vote. He gets 199 with 7 voting for Scalise, 5 for McCarthy, and 10 for others. That's go up, Colin. There you go. And then lastly, round 3, the third round vote, you had Jim Jordan getting 194, losing even more. So he was trending in the wrong direction, to put it lightly. It seemed like he was going to continue to kind of go along with this and just do what McCarthy did way back in January of last year and just grind it out again. McCarthy had 15 votes in a row back then before becoming Speaker. Matt Gaetz and co, the 8 folks here, all decided that they were going to try to be all in on Jim Jordan. And Matt Gaetz actually published an open letter saying as far as they would go to do it. Colin, I believe we've got that tweet with the letter. You can just click right on the letter here. So this was from Matt Gaetz and 7 other members of Congress. Dear colleague, the recent passage of motion to vacate of the Speaker has caused a rancor, hurt feelings, and acrimony in the House Republican Conference. While we stand by our actions, it is our goal to proceed forward with our colleagues, our teammates, our fellow Republicans in a manner that embraces reconciliation. It has been suggested that the conference cannot move forward until there are consequences for each of us. While we violated no rule of either the House of the Republican Caucus, we understand that some in the conference wish to punish us. The actions we took were never about us. They were to change Washington for the better. The House now needs a speaker, and we have a speaker designate in Jim Jordan of Ohio. Therefore, if the holdouts who refuse to vote for the speaker designate Jordan would be willing to, quote, vote with the team and elect him the 56th Speaker of the House, we are prepared to accept censure, suspension, or removal from the conference to accomplish this objective. We remain proud members of the Republican Party as nominated by our respective districts. What unites us as Republicans is more important than our disagreements. We must now come together to elect Jim Jordan. We offer this sincerely with the hope of unity with purpose. Our fidelity to the Republican virtues and principles remains unwavering. And that's coming from the 8 members of Congress here. Andy Biggs, Ken Buck, Tim Burchett, Eli Crane, Matt Gaetz, Bob Good, Nancy Mace, and Matt Rosendale. That letter apparently wasn't enough because Jim Jordan is now not running for Speaker of the House anymore. He's out of it. Said he's not throwing his name back in the hat, at least for the time being. That could change for sure. And now there are 9 candidates for Speaker of the House at this point. 9 people running. To me, that just says that this is going nowhere fast. Clearly, they're all over the place. Colin, we can go ahead and pull up the CNN article now that actually has the candidates listed here. I'm not going to kind of go through the details on all of them, but you can scroll down and we'll just kind of read off their names. So we've got Rep. Tom Emmer, Kevin Hern, Jack Burgum, Austin Scott, Byron Donalds, Mike Johnson, Pete Sessions, Dan Musier, Rep. Gary Palmer. I mean, some of these are folks that a lot of Americans are going to not really know who they are. Right now, the 2 that are kind of, up front are going to be Tom Emmer and Byron Donalds. They're 2 very different characters. I'm not going to pretend I know everything about these guys because I don't. But doing a little bit of research, Tom Emmer is very much the establishment figure, if you will. He is not really a Trump guy. He's more of just the normal, I don't know what you call a normal Republican these days, but he's more establishment Republican, we'll say. He's actually gotten the endorsement from McCarthy as well. But he today is kind of trying to play his cards to maybe get some sort of mention from Trump. I mentioned before he's not really a Trump guy, but we can go ahead and just play the clip of him kind of now pretending to be a Trump guy. I don't know.
It wasn't going to be a big distraction. It's become that, but I think the reason why I'll be able to get there is a couple. Number
Colin,
one,
I don't think this is the. Do we have the?
But Mr. Speaker, you're talking about all of the urgent needs, all of the pressure, including the war in Israel. Why isn't that?
We might have missed the clip. It's okay. That's my bad. Basically, there was a clip today of Donald Trump saying that Tom Emmer a reporter asked Donald Trump.
Do you endorse Tom Emmer for Speaker? He hasn't historically been your biggest fan, but he is the most likely candidate right now.
Well, I think he's my biggest fan now because he called me yesterday and he told me I'm your biggest fan. So I don't know about that. Well, we're looking at a lot of people and, I'm sort of trying to stay out of that as much as possible. But they'll get it straightened out. But no, I've always gotten along with him and I get along with all of them, really. A lot of good people. We have a lot of great people.
Apologies on the confusion there, but we got the point across in the end here. So, and I set it up weirdly, but Donald Trump was asked about Tom Emmer today, and Tom Emmer was basically saying like, "Oh, I've got a great working relationship with Trump." Trump, normally good with little quips like this, being like, "Well, yeah, now everyone says that they want, blah 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 blah." Says he's not going to get too involved, but definitely pretty interesting to see. It sounds like Kevin McCarthy thinks that Emmer can actually get across the finish line. We can go ahead and pull up the article from The Hill. McCarthy backs Emmer for Speaker. He knows how to do the job. Former Speaker McCarthy is backing House Majority Whip Tom Emmer for the speakership, saying that he has the skills needed for the role. McCarthy said on Meet the Press that now is not the moment in time to play around with learning on the job, citing the ongoing violence in the Middle East, the U.S.-Mexico border, country's economy as primary reasons. He suggested that Emmer is, quote, someone who understands how to do the job. I believe Tom Emmer, our whip, has been in the room with all of our successes, from our bills to secure the border, from the Parents' Bill of Rights to cutting $2 trillion, getting work requirements. He knows how to do the job across the street at the same time, helping us win the majority. Again, that endorsement from McCarthy, I'm not sure that it is worth very much in today's day and age, considering that, again, McCarthy took 15 votes to even become Speaker and then was removed from the position, again, just 3 weeks ago. The second kind of candidate who might be able to get some attention here is Byron Donalds. He is definitely more of a MAGA Trump guy. He's going to have the exact opposite problem as Emmer. I don't think Emmer is going to get the support of the Matt Gaetz crew. Byron Donalds might, but Byron Donalds is probably not going to get the support of some of the more McCarthy type folks. Not probably, he's almost definitely not. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what Byron Donalds said earlier today.
It wasn't going to be a big distraction. It's become that. But I think the reason why I'll be able to get there is a couple. Number one, being a member of the Freedom Caucus, I've also had the opportunity to work with members in Main Street, members who are on the more moderate side of our conference. We've worked well together this entire time. They trust me that when I say something that I mean it, and I'm not going to try to hide it from them what the realities are internally in our conference. Number two, more importantly, I believe we got to get back to work, pass our appropriation bills, get that stuff done. We got to continue to fight for securing our border, something that our entire conference can get behind. And number three, I think we have an opportunity to really turn this page from this period where we've been a little chaotic, to reset the narrative politically, reset our agendas here on Capitol Hill, and go fight for meaningful conservative policies for the American people.
I don't know. We'll see. One last clip I want to share that I just thought was hilarious. Kevin McCarthy knows this is bad for the Republican Party, as basically anyone with a brain knows. Obviously, they are in disarray at the moment with no signs of it ending. Let's just listen to what Kevin McCarthy had to say over the weekend.
But, Mr. Speaker, you're talking about all of the urgent needs, all of the pressure, including the war in Israel. Why isn't that enough to have already gotten a speaker in place holding the gavel? Why should it be any different now with Tom Emmer? You said the same thing about Jim Jordan last week.
Well, I think why would it be the case that I'd still be in the job? Unfortunately, we have 8 people led by Gaetz that put something different in their belief. I don't know why they would follow Gaetz about his ethics complaint. I don't know what's in it. I legally can't be involved in it. It must be rather serious to put this much jeopardy into this nation. I would have hoped that everyone would come together with their put the country before the politics and actually solve this. Steve Scalise would have done an excellent job. I supported him. Jim Jordan would have. I just know this is not a time to play games. This is embarrassing for the Republican Party. It's embarrassing for the nation, and we need to look at one another and solve the problem.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories.
So embarrassing for the Republican Party, Kevin McCarthy just admitting it right there. And I mean, again, it's a mess. It's a huge mess. Who the hell knows at this point where this is going to go? Probably, unfortunately, the most likely situation is going to be, I mean, we've got the government shutdown is going to be coming up soon. I don't have the specific date for that off the top of my head, but in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be thinking about government shutdown again because they just passed a continuing resolution, kind of kicked the can down the road the last time around. What I think is going to potentially be most likely is you've got this kind of pro tem speaker McHenry in place at the moment. And maybe what we'll see is individual pieces of legislation getting a specific rule change that, we're going to allow McHenry to put this up for a vote and kind of kick the can down the road, maybe keep the government open, maybe pass a multi-billion-dollar Ukraine and Israel war package for sure. I'm sure plenty of bipartisan support there. We very likely are not going to see a normal Speaker of the House anytime soon, in my opinion, especially when you got 9 people running right now and kind of the main names involved really are not going to have the support of the people you need. Again, you can only lose 5 votes. Not a great situation if you're a Republican legislature right now at all. Yeah, I'm going to start to wrap this up. One thing I did want to bring up, and someone left a comment about this in the very, 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 very beginning of this, and I wanted to bring it up. Why did Democrats side with Matt Gaetz? This chaos is on them as well. And I thought that was a hilarious take. I've heard a couple people mention it. Thank you for the comment, Ray, even though I'm going to disagree with you here. And folks, last minute for a super chat. If you want to get one in, I will definitely read it here. But the Democrats have no reason to necessarily align with the Republicans here. I'll give you the reason that they kind of could. Looking at it this way, especially if Jim Jordan were actually had a chance, although now it doesn't seem like they did. Kevin McCarthy is probably one of the more like moderate folks who is going to be able, or who would have been able to get votes from the Freedom Caucus members back then. You know what I mean? So he went in here. The Freedom Caucus folks are basically now saying they're only going to vote for like a Jim Jordan or more conservative is a line they were floating before, things of that nature. So Democrats could have tried to keep Kevin McCarthy in the seat with the mentality that the next Speaker of the House is probably going to be more conservative. It almost doesn't matter in a sense in some ways, because again, it's like Joe Biden still needs to sign a bill. The bill needs to go through the Senate still. That's one way to look at it, I guess. Another way, I mean, if I'm in the Democratic caucus and trying to make these decisions, really though, the only reason I would justify allowing any Democrat votes to go over is if I'm getting a major concession from the Republican who we're voting for, votes on the floor for specific legislative points that Democrats want. And clearly they're not getting that. You know what I mean? And I see, Michael, what lesser of two evils sort of thing. Yeah, I get like, this isn't what I think, but Democrats could get their head behind it if they're thinking in a lesser of two evils type of mentality. I disagree. I don't think that that's how it should happen. But if I'm putting that hat on for a second of like, why would they ever do this? That's probably why. More, reality based. If I'm a Democrat in Congress, or I'm like, controlling some people in the caucus, the only reason I'm ever going to vote for a Republican is if it's like, we're going to get a floor vote on something that is of major importance to the caucus and the constituents at this point in time. So I don't know. I don't know what the hell is going to happen. It's a big shit show, if you ask me. All that being said, I will not be on the live stream for the rest of the week, but you're in good hands with Ron Placone and Tina Desiree Berg. Maybe you'll get an appearance from Jordan. I don't know. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you're not subscribed to us here on Status Coup already, please hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the bell for notifications to find out when we're going to be live, so that you can make sure you're here. I want to thank everybody for watching us today. It was a big show. We covered a lot. I got to rest my voice here. That was a lot of blabbing. You didn't have a guest today. So thanks for bearing with me, everybody. I wish you well the rest of the week, and we will see you all soon.